Hello everyone, and welcome to the Finalising Detailed Designs Phase 3 consultation webinar for the walkways for Barandon Walk, Hurstway Walk and Testerton Walk. My name is Peter Ingalls and I am one of the Senior Project Managers at the Lancaster West Neighbourhood Team, and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. Some quick housekeeping. This meeting's been recorded for residents and will be put on the Lancaster West Neighbourhood Team's communication channels. So please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking. We encourage a camera on policy, so if you're comfortable with that, please do turn your cameras on, especially when you're speaking. So our presentation today, we're going to go through some introductions for the team, have a little recap of where we are on the timeline and on resident preferences and choices, and then our design team will take you through their finalised detailed designs. We'll talk about the next steps and talk around the options that we're asking for your feedback and choices on, and some of those choices will be individual choices for your particular flat. So it's really important that you give us these choices so that we can give you your first choice where that's possible. The design team that we've got today is led by Capital as their project manager, and with the specialist designers that you can see listed here. So many of you will have met James Caspel, our neighbourhood director, and also here on the call today are members of our Lancaster West team, Britam and Maria, who many of you will have met, and others who are involved from our team are shown here as well. We also have a communications team led by Linda, and many of us are going to be coming round to talk to you on your doorsteps over the next couple of weeks. If you've any queries, please do talk to us, and we can help you fill in the new choices forms there as well. Also with us today are Mark Elton, who is the lead designer, the architect of the scheme, and he's going to talk through the proposals. And standing in for Richard is Auntie Michaelides, who is the consultant project manager, who is managing the design process and will be managing the contractors as well. So where are we? We have already gone through processes with many of you before on the right going back to the original resident consultation and book of ideas, where you established your priorities, what was most important to you, and windows being top of that list. And from that, we developed initial design proposals and engagement and got your feedback on these ideas. Phase 2 was where you were choosing broad themes, broad colour palettes, and the direction that the detailed design should go in. That's a little while ago now, it's about 18 months ago. So there's been a big gap between there and where we are now. But what we're doing now is building on all that advice that you gave us at that point and showing you the finalised detailed designs, where really the elements, we're really getting into the detail now and seeking your expertise of living in the block to help us finalise some of those. That's really important to us to hear about it. So just to kind of go through some of the kind of big picture preferences that residents voted on last time out. What was very important was that you voted for triple glazed windows. The majority of people chose for triple glazed windows in the Ideal Combi Futura Plus range, which a lot of you will have seen within the pilot flats, and choosing a top hung outward opening way of opening and operating these windows, outward opening, so that your blinds and curtains are not affected by opening the windows. Vast majority voted for ideal combi sliding doors to the patios. So we have incorporated both of these where size allows us to do that. And looking at the finished colours, there were various colour palettes presented where you chose a white, grey and cream colour palette. So you'll see that developed in the slides here. And 67% voted for maximising the external wall insulation, and that's really important to reducing energy bills and also keeping you comfortable throughout the year. So that's a little bit more detail. So that's what the windows look like. They're triple glazed, they're outward opening, they're reversible, so you can clean them from the insides, but they have mechanisms to restrict to a small opening as well for safety of people inside as well. And new front doors, there was a vote for the 60-minute fire resistant front doors colour. So this is a programme where the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea are fitting new fire doors to every flat in the borough, and from the choices of the colours, you voted for blue steel last time out. Some of these have started to be fitting already. The rest of them will be fitted over the course of alongside the works for the rest of the works in the block. That's the sliding balcony doors, and that's the arrangement of them where we can, where flats allow two windows to slide to make a large opening. That's what we're offering. But from some of the residents' feedback that we've had, other people have thought that arrangement didn't work for them. So we're actually, as you'll see in a little while, offering an option on exactly how these windows open. Mark will talk about that in a few slides' time. Where we can't fit sliding doors, and there are some places at the end of some of the balconies where the door is either a single opening door or a very narrow door and panel, the doors will be inward opening, again triple glazed windows in the same range and the same colour. And this was a slide from phase 2, where we were looking at different ways of putting insulation onto the building. As you'll see in a minute, we've developed that strategy somewhat, but this was looking at colour palettes, and this was white, cream and grey block facade with maximising the insulation on the outside where we could. So now we're into phase 3 and we're finalising the detailed design. I'm going to hand over to Mark Elton to talk through that process.
Okay, so before we get into the detail of the proposals, for the benefit of those who may not have been involved or engaged before this period, I thought it was worth going over some of the principles of low energy retrofit and the reasons why we're actually doing a lot of these works. So when we talk about an energy efficient strategy, it means that we are applying measures to the building that ultimately aim to reduce the heating needs of those spaces, whilst at the same time improving thermal comfort for the inhabitants. So when we talk about thermal comfort, we talk about the body's ability to remain stable in a comfortable, stable temperature within a space, without requiring excessive energy to keep warm or to keep cool. We lose heat from our bodies in 3 ways. We lose it by conduction. When we touch cold surfaces, we transfer heat across to that. So typically that would be cold floors. We lose heat by convection. So when cooler air blows over our bodies, it wicks heat away. And anyone who's lived in a drafty room will know the feeling of that and the discomfort that cold drafts can bring you. And those are fairly familiar to most people, but what may not be so apparent is the third way that we lose heat, and actually it accounts for about 50% of the heat that we lose from our bodies, is by radiation. So all warm bodies radiate heat to cooler bodies. If we were to put a thermal image camera onto someone sitting in an uninsulated room, you will see the body in bright colors as a warm body, and you would see the walls in the background as cold surfaces. So our bodies are constantly transmitting heat to the colder surfaces around us. And we can stop that by raising the temperatures of all of the surfaces, by which I mean the ceiling, the floors, the walls, and even the windows. And we can do that by adding insulation to the outside of the building. That will make the internal surfaces, we need to bring them up to around 17, 18 degrees so that our bodies are not radiating heat dramatically. That also needs to happen to the windows. So that's why we're looking to introduce high performance triple glazed windows. The third pane means that the internal surface temperatures of that window remain warm. And it also means that it's not cooling air and creating downdrafts at the window. Because downdrafts are something that we really want to do. We don't want to spend energy and money warming up the air in our rooms only for it to escape through cracks in the construction. So eliminating air drafts is something that's important to the energy efficiency of the building. The third, the other element that is being introduced to these flats is called mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. Now, of course, in any flat, as we make it less drafty, there's less fresh air getting into the building. So we do that. So we maintain good air quality by introducing filtered fresh air through the heat recovery ventilation system, which at the same time is taking stale air away from bathrooms and from kitchens and transferring the heat energy from that air directly into the incoming air, fresh air from outside. And that way we can retain up to 80% of the heat energy, all the while bringing 100% fresh filtered air that's taken out pollen and dust. So those measures work in combination to reduce the heat loss and the energy use, and therefore bills in our homes. The other benefit, of course, of having warmer internal surface temperatures is that condensation cannot form if the walls are warm, and if there's no condensation, then there's no mold. So all in all, these measures will create much healthier internal environments. Next slide, please. So to look in detail at some of the measures that are being installed, external wall insulation is the biggest change that will happen. Now, this is a system that is applied to the outside surface of every part of the building. So all the external walls, the soffits, and well, to the roofs are also being done in a slightly different system. But this external wall insulation has a number of components that aim to achieve those sorts of measures and improvements that we were just describing. It's made up of a parge coat, which is a mineral plaster layer that goes over the existing brickwork, and that does the job of keeping our air drafts out and leakage of the building out. The main layer of this build-up is a stone wool insulation. So this is literally made from basalt rock that has been melted and spun like candy floss and turned into insulation, trapping air pockets within its matrix. Because it's made of rock, it literally cannot burn. It is an A1 rated material, non-combustible. And the nature of that material means that it prevents heat loss from inside, but it works both ways. It also stops heat from outside in the summer getting towards the inside, so that will help keep stable, cooler temperatures in the summer. The outer layer can vary. It can be either like a plaster render finish, but for our purposes, the majority of the outside layer is using a system of brick slips. So these are literally real bricks, real clay bricks that are bonded to the outside. They're a lightweight version of a real brick, but to the naked eye, they will look no different than normal bricks. And we're looking to have two different brick types that will be applied to the facades of this building. Next slide, please. So for that insulation to be effective, it has to be continuous around the outside of our building. What you're looking at here is a slice through that building. You can see the basement areas that have garages in them, or in the case of Barandon, it has the baseline studios. In those blocks, certainly Testerton and Hurstway, these are unheated spaces. So we need to insulate our living accommodation from those unheated spaces. At roof level, there is new insulation going on across all the flat roof areas. There's an ongoing program of improving the glazing to eliminate the leakage and to introduce better smoke vents. So that deals with the top and the bottom of these spaces. What we're looking at here now is the proposals for dealing with the walls and the windows. And that needs to wrap continuously around the outside of the building so that there are no gaps as best we can do it. The internal spaces, so all those corridors and the communal street and the areas where they open up to the glazed roofs, they will remain unheated spaces, albeit they are enclosed, so they're not going to get wind howling through them, because the entrances will be replaced with new glazing, new partitions. But nevertheless, this is an unheated space, so we don't want to actually lose heat into that space from the flats. So there will be insulation being added to the interior surfaces of the flats. We don't have images of that yet. That's the next element that's going to be worked on. And it won't need to be to the same level as the external insulation, but nevertheless, it will be there. And that gives us an opportunity to refurbish the inside look of the building so that it's to a similar level as the external. Next slide, please. So how does this insulation affect the outside of the building, or in particular where your flats interface with the outside? So inevitably we are wrapping that combination of insulation and bricks across every surface. So wherever you have a window that currently goes up tight to the brickwork, that when that window is replaced, it will go up tight to the new brickwork, but it means there will be a small area of infill covering the end of the new insulation. So your windows, this also will happen at soffit level, where we're covering insulation to the underside of flats where you have a recessed area. So it does mean that your all your windows and patio doors will get marginally smaller. We're talking about small percentages here, depending on each interaction with the new insulation. We could be talking by between 7 and 12%. So not a huge amount. Most of these windows are in fact oversized for the size of accommodation behind them. So there should be it shouldn't be too detrimental. We will be looking in some cases to win back some of that balcony space, and we'll talk about that later. The image there just shows for those flats, commonly on the lower levels, I think, where we are replacing the windows, and the image shows how those double slider doors will push out and then slide across the fixed panels to either side. Next slide, please. If your flat has that type of window or that kind of glazed screen with opening onto a balcony, this is where we are looking at a couple of options on the fenestration that's put back in. The default option, if you like, will be that you have two large doors in the center that will both push out and then slide across the fixed plane to give you as wide an opening onto your balcony as possible. Those doors will lock in a sort of cracked open position so that they can open, I think it's less than 100 mil width, and they can be locked into position so that you're getting some ventilation overnight perhaps, but without losing any security. For those who might want to have a different option, to have the option of opening windows as well as a sliding door, option 2 shows you there how that might work, in that you get two opening windows on the outer side of the glazed ensemble, and then you just get the one single push-out door that slides in front of the fixed pane. It's technically not possible to have a sliding door that slides in front of an opening window because of things like handles and the runners that the slider has to fix against. So these are the two options that you will be invited to comment on in the surveys. Next slide, please. Some of you may have a similar but slightly different arrangement whereby you have a low brick wall over part of the part of that fenestration opening onto a balcony. In that scenario, we're not intending to remove the brick wall. We will look to improve its thermal performance by adding insulation to the outside. But in this scenario, you will get the window elements replaced, and again, the push-out single sliding door. You may, in fact, have a variation on this, where you, instead of that grey wall, you have a fixed glazed element in that zone. And I think in that case, one of the other previous option 1 or option 2 would be applicable. Next slide, please. For bedrooms, the impact is less, obviously, because the windows are they're smaller generally, so the percentage impact, if you like, of reduction on those window sizes is therefore smaller. So there is some impact on the window head, the soffit insulation, and the need for the MVHR ducts to pass above the windows means that the windows get slightly lower. And if your window happens to have a return wall with insulation coming in on the side, then there's a small impact there of reduction. But again, these are small percentages on the overall window sizes. Next slide, please. For balconies generally, we need to insulate the outside wall where you have this example here is a one-bed flat. We do need to insulate the outside wall, but we are trying to minimize the impact on the balcony size by opting for just 100 millimeters of insulation with a render finish that halves the overall thickness of a typical wall and reduces the impact on the size of balcony in that scenario. I'll come to, you'll see an image later, but in some areas where the outside face of the brick parapet forming that balcony clashes with the proposed insulation brickwork around the corner, we are looking to remove brickwork facing to the parapet and replace it with a new metal balustrade. And you'll see that in some of the images later. And in those areas, in those flat types, it does mean that your balcony, the width will increase to offset the reduction in the end areas where the new insulation is intending to be put in. Next slide, please. So rather than have one type of brick covering the whole of these large facades, we have opted to have a sort of two-tone brick finish, and this slide here just demonstrates how we are making the differentiation between the two. So effectively you get a kind of base to the building, so where the building is closest to the road, closest to the garden courtyards, that will be in one brick color, again taken from the whites, creams, greys themes. And then at the higher levels where the brick is set back, there is a different brick finish with a different appearance, but complementary. Next slide, please. So here's a kind of first view of how that might look. You can see we're not looking at a radical difference between these two types of brick. They are complementary, and again, inspired by the previous residents' majority choice, which was for the whites, greys, creams, and they're taken from that color palette that you can see top left there. Also in the foreground of this image, you can see one example of where that replacement metal balustrade is being proposed to win back some of the balcony space. So you have a more darker buff grey brick to the base areas, and then a more cream coloured brick to the upper areas. Where there are some grey panels at the moment, infilling between adjacent windows across the ends of party walls, we are looking to finish those areas with a light grey render finish that will in some ways mimic what's there at the moment. That will allow us to have a lesser impact on widths at the back of balconies as well. Next slide, please. For the entrances to the block, we are looking to have a contrast in the material. So picking from the theme again, we've opted for a white glazed brick finish to pick out all of the entrances. The image here is of the Hurstway block, of the ramp that takes up to the side entrance of Hurstway. And you can see how that entrance is framed in the white brick. And they're all receiving new entrance doors, new sort of lighter glazed areas to those entrances to give it a modern, contemporary look. Next slide, please. These are the courtyard entrances, which are less for visitors and more for residents to access the garden. So currently these are not very attractive spaces. They get used for rubbish collection by dropping bags off of the balconies. They tend to be where a lot of external services have been applied over the years. So we're looking to tidy all of those up, make all the services taken up to roof level or more discreet areas, replace the security on those, and enclose the staircases. The staircases will become improved for fire safety reasons, so that they become areas of refuge in the worst case scenario. And they just mean that the spaces will become more comfortable. So that's an image of a typical courtyard entrance. Next slide, please. This is more recognizable. So this is the entrance to Hurstway Walk, the one that's closest to the Latimer Road tube stop. What we're looking to do here is enlarge around the existing staircase. So where you can see the words Hurstway Walk written up in the sign, that is in fact new accommodation being built over the top of the existing entrance. that new accommodation will provide for secure cycle storage, for example, so that helps to alleviate the need to lock bikes in the main street area. So we are looking at several opportunities to improve secure cycle storage facility. So that's integrated into this entrance design, again with the white glazed brick theme and a planted roof in this case. Next slide, please. At the podium ends, so the 300 ends of the blocks, for those that use those entrances, we are looking to again enhance the insulation standards and improve the entrance in a similar theme to the other entrances, with the white glazed tiles and the new curtain walling entrance to there. We are looking at the moment at integration of a new access stair for maintenance operations to the roof level, so that wouldn't be open to anyone other than operatives and secured at that level. Yeah, next slide, please. So the new balustrades, there are some areas where the existing masonry walls to the balconies clash with the masonry walls to the flats themselves, and it would mean that there'd be a large area with no insulation in those cases. So that's where we have looked to have an option to remove the masonry to allow the insulation to fully wrap around the corners of those flats, and then to replace it with a metal balustrade with vertical fins on the outside and a perforated solid panel on the inside. And that will, as I said previously, have the added effect of gaining a little bit more space back on those balcony types. Next slide, please. Here are some close-ups of the proposed bricks. You can see the grey buff base brick, bottom left, the cream brick to the upper levels. We have some areas, particularly on the Grenfell Walk ends, where we're looking at introducing a pattern brickwork style. And as I said, there are some areas with light grey render. These will be put onto samples that will be initially available in baseline, but we are looking to have more samples of these available throughout the site. Next slide, please. So this is another element that residents are being asked their thoughts on. This is a general view, happens to be Testerton Walk, but the strategy applies everywhere. So you have the grey buff brick to the lower levels, and then the cream brick to the upper level. That, if you like, is the default option. This is how the building would look. And we hope you'll agree that this is very much in the theme of the whites, greys and creams. It will give a fresh new look to the buildings. It will give clarity about where the entrances are to the building for residents, visitors, deliveries, etc. So that's all part of that strategy that we're looking at. Next slide will be another view, this same sort of option from a different angle. Here you see at the Whitchurch Road end, the cream brick becomes more prominent at this end as that building shape changes. Next slide, please. And this is a view from another block at the other end. So what won't change is that the existing brickwork is staying red. The areas of landscaping, etc., will stay as they are at the moment, but it's the living accommodation that will receive the insulated new brick finishes. Next slide, please. We are asking about the extent of the pattern brickwork. So at the moment, it's a default. It will appear on the Grenfell Walk ends, the 300 ends. but there are opportunities to introduce more of it into the upper levels. This slide shows a similar area to before with a limited pattern brickwork, as does the next slide, please. So there's a limited amount there. And then a third option is to go more all out with the pattern brickwork. Next slide, please. So you can see more of that patterned effect being applied to those upper levels. So part of the questionnaire is if you have any preferences about the extent of that pattern brickwork to make your views clear on that. Next slide, which I think is probably my last one. Yeah, so there's a couple of different views of how that pattern brickwork would extend across the scheme. Next slide. Yeah, so these are where the roof works interface with the external wall insulation works, and there are a number of issues around these terrace areas that are being discussed at the moment. And I'm going to hand over to Peter to talk more about those particular issues related to these areas.
So for residents that are on the top floor who have these balcony terraces, we're going to be replacing the terraces with the pergolas with non-flammable metal pergolas, and it's a design that we're still working through at the moment. So what you're looking at here are not finished designs, and we have done some pilot studies on one of our flats in Testerton Walk to trial this, but they're not finished by any means, and we're looking for residents' comments on the designs, but also what we're looking to offer, if at all we can, is actually individual residents' choice on how they're finished for their individual flats. So if you look at the next slide here, this is a sort of first option that we're looking at, and there are some difficulties with this that we're working through at the moment to do with weight and to do with cleaning. But the first option is that we'd like to offer is to have a glazed canopy on top of the pergola, so that it's keeping the rain out of the terrace. So if this is something that you'd like and we can manage to make it technically work, this is something that we'd like to offer to tenants who want a finish like this. We're saying at the moment for secure tenants only. We're looking at ways to extend this offer to leaseholders, but that's something that we're working with at the moment to understand, working with home ownership about how these might be charged if leaseholders wanted to upgrade essentially to a glazed canopy. So if we can, we'll offer that, but we can discuss that further with individual leaseholders. The next option is another view of that glazed canopy looking back towards the atrium roof lights. And the next slide is an option of a trellis, and this is one where it's open to the sky, so the rain would come in, but this would make the terrace more airy. It's open to the air above, and this has breeze relay on it, which are metal fins that will help with sun shading. So although it's open and you can see the sky, it'll help take the sun off the terraces. Next slide. And a third option would be for wires, stainless steel wires between the metal structure of the pergola, and this is for people who might want to grow trailing plants along their terrace. So these are the three options that we're asking, that if we can make these options work technically, which would be your preference? And as I've sort of said before, our intention would be to offer residents their particular choice on their particular terrace. So your neighbour could choose a glazed roof, and you could choose this wired option for trailing plants if you so wished. Next slide. And the other thing we're asking for your comments on are your comments on waste strategy. Now, we know from previous consultations that many residents have valued bin chutes, but we also know that some residents have found the operation of them problematic. If at all we can keep them, we're looking technically at whether we can. We would need to enclose them into enclosed rooms within the staircases. And we're also discussing with the Grenfell Memorial team the practicalities of continuing to wheel the bins out at the back end of the site. The planning officers also have a view on refuse strategy. But so we can get a complete picture, we would like to get your thoughts on whether having bin chutes is something you'd value, or whether you would prefer for upgraded bins to be external to the building. So we know there are pros and cons to both, but we want to get your views. If the next slide. So it does show that this slide shows that if we look at putting bins outside, and there will be some because recycling bins can't be incorporated into the current bin chutes, we're looking to enclose them into much neater, tidier enclosures on the outside of the building. As is the case at the moment, for those who can't physically can't take their bins outside, W11 will look to make it for individual arrangements with those residents to collect your waste. Next. But these are the locations that we're looking at. Is effectively maintaining bins in the places they are currently outside and adding some extra provisions. We're especially looking at trying to find ways to add provisions at the 300 ends of the blocks where currently the provision is substandard, and we're in discussions with various parties about the best way to do that. Again, what will be important to us is that they're close and convenient to you, they're safe, and they're well lit. And as I've said, we can provide assistance for those with mobility issues who can't take the waste to collection points. Next.
Sorry, Peter, before we go on to the next steps, there's some comments in the chat. Could we just address those before we go any further?
Okay. So I can see that Simhar on the chat is politely disagreeing with Mark. The external wall insulation wraps, you would be losing the historic architecture of the blocks, changing the whole walkway's interior with cheap modern brick slips. This is a waste of money and labour. Why not respect the 1960-70 heritage look with cleaning and repointing existing brickworks? We've seen successful refurbishments such as Coal Drop Yard and King's Cross by modernising heritage look without covering it up. For me, the new external wall options make it look like a cheap housing block, which will decrease the property valuation. Just like the proposed looks, designers have got it wrong with exterior solutions and cream will dirty over the years. And a mismatched set of bricks on site, I'm not convinced either with the walkways and common areas. So Simhar, the walkways and common areas is a future consultation exercise we're going to do separately. The designs for that are not quite ready to share yet, but we'd be looking at doing something quite different internally in the buildings. Maybe I can ask Mark to kind of address why we can't just simply clean up the existing block brickwork.
Well, as I've said before, what we're trying to do here is improve the energy efficiency of the building as a whole. And to do that, we need to significantly enhance the insulation levels. The correct place to do that is to put it onto the outside of the building. And for that will allow us to wrap the insulation around soffits, across the brickwork, around windows. Yes, you're going to lose the existing look in that process, but it comes down to personal viewpoints. Many people do not share a love of the look of these blocks as they stand, and we've had generally quite positive feedback about the concept of adding new external brickwork to the facades. And technically, it's the right place to be doing it to maximize energy efficiency of the blocks.
There's another question in the chat from, I think it's Bashir Hassan. So apologies if I've got that round the wrong way. That's how it appears on my chat here. Agreeing, I think, but saying heritage brickwork can be found across South Kensington as sunny and unique, so agrees with Simhar. But nevertheless, brighter colours also lean to a broader appeal, and I'm a fan of this colourway, albeit bland. I think it's not a bad thing. So thank you for that. I think the other question is about waste strategy. Please take a close focus on resident behaviours. Priorities to increase capacity, and people are currently throwing bins off balconies and leaving them in front of the chutes. Yes, that's I think that's a very fair point. We've heard that from other residents as well, that the chutes they've got very small apertures, and people, if the bags don't fit, tend to leave them outside, which creates a hazard in itself. And the throwing the bins off the balconies and leaving them in front of the chutes. Well, throwing them off the balconies, we know at the midpoints of the block that's possible at the moment, and because we've been closing the staircases, that won't be possible anymore. That's one of the things that we're doing to stop that behaviour. But you're saying, picturing it's cold and wet, I'm not walking far to throw away my rubbish. I absolutely agree. And that's why we're looking at trying to introduce more collection points than we currently have, so that there's collection points at every entranceway, and we're looking to have that sort of option of the both and those new collection points, and if residents are in favour of keeping some of the chutes, to keep the chutes, so that we've got options for people. The collection points for recycling, yes, absolutely. That's the idea, that we would collect together recycling and general waste in these collection points outside, so that people can take all the rubbish together and separate it. But yes, the point about the rain is very important, and it's something, again, the more sort of comments we have with that, we can look at whether introducing canopies and good lighting potentially, so that these are better, more pleasant and safe to use. Also within the question here, you sort of said, I think it'll be easier to increase current capacity of waste disposal points, and people who care about the environment won't mind the extra steps to recycle. Right, that's a good point. And Simhar, I think on your point there about no mice residents thereafter, presumably the mice there because the spaces are open and people leave rubbish. These enclosures that we've got here, part of the intention of these is that they prevent rodents getting into the bins areas at all. And cockroaches, digressing. I think there's similar. You've also asked a question about the commercial contractors are charging leaseholders a price tag of 115,000 for a full refurbishment. Yes, that's what the full refurbishment that our secure tenants, that's what it costs to refurbish each apartment. So there is a scheme whereby leaseholders can have a full strip out and refurbishment to the same standard as the secure tenants. That's the cost of that, getting that full refurbishment if you want to go down that way. What we're looking at for leaseholders is using a scheme which is doing a version which is much more light touch to fit the MVHR sprinklers into apartments, and if you go for that option, that's not recharged. The only element of everything that we're looking at today that would be recharged to leaseholders is the upgrade of the heating network, because that's a renewal of an existing facility. We have a grant funding for windows for insulation for the renewal of the roof. We're not recharging leaseholders a penny for that, and we're not recharging leaseholders for the upgrade of the fire systems and the sprinklers on these blocks as well. Shall we continue to next steps?
Thanks, Peter. So next steps. So following this presentation today and the sessions that took place previously, the residents are going to be asked to give their feedback and preferences on their external finishes. And then the intention is for LW&T to collate this information and share with us at Capital and the architects. And then this information, we can use it and it'll be included in the proposed designs for planning. But in the meantime, we're engaging with the planners regarding the planning pre-application about the proposed scheme and to obtain initial feedback from them. And then the full planning application can commence, and we have a plan to have this submitted within the early part of July. So appointment of stage 1 contractor to work with the design team on detailed design proposals. Well, the intention here is to work collaboratively with the contractor to develop the detailed designs, and this will enable some clarity from all parties when it comes to undertaking the works, but also on site, and then provide some clarity in terms of cost certainty. And finally, the intention is to carry out some pilot installations to roof level units. This will give us the opportunity to test out the installation of the windows, the terrace doors, and the external wall finishes as well. Next slide.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. So we have a survey based on the information in this webinar that residents will have received a copy of the survey through your letterbox. If you haven't received one, you can come into Baseline Studios at reception, and we'll leave some copies there if you want to fill them in by hand. You can return them to the same place, to the reception in Baseline, or you can place them in dedicated silver survey box, which we'll position outside Baseline Studios. We've also got an online version of the survey if you prefer to do it that way. There'll be a link to that on the e-newsletter, or you can also access it by scanning this QR code on the slide here, which is also shared on social media booklets and posters and letters. You can text or WhatsApp us on the number on the screen there, and we can send you a link to that survey if you haven't got it. Please take the chance to give us your choices. As we've said, some of these choices are individual choices to your particular flat. So it's really, you know, it's something we're really keen that all residents engage with, because it's it'll help us to get the designs, you know, right for your individual house. And we're looking to get the surveys back by midnight on Sunday, the 9th of June 2024. Our teams are going to be coming round the blocks, doing door knocking next week and the week after. And so, you know, if you want to chat to the teams about any of these details of that, please do. And I think if you haven't subscribed to the resident newsletter, please do. These QR codes let you do that. And I'm just checking in the chat that there's any more any more comments in there at the moment. And yes, I've got the comments there coming in from Bashir Hassan again. Keen to see improvements in lighting. Frightening how long the poor lighting existed through the green spaces and the entrances. So absolutely, the entrance lighting will be upgraded as part of these works. And we're looking at we've just appointed a landscape architect to look in detail at the landscape area, including the lighting in the open spaces as well. And lighting within the main atrium spaces will be part of the next consultation we do in the interior space. This is, as I said before, this is a sort of two-part phase 3 consultation. So yes, and flood management when it rains, water collects. Well, within the atrium areas, that will very much be part of the roof works contract that's ongoing at the moment. In Barandon, the first of the very old roof lights is being replaced, and that should completely eliminate that problem of rain coming into the buildings with the modern smoke extract system that we're putting at the top of these roof lights. Are there any other questions in the chat before I wrap this up? And if you you can always record your comments on the form as well, the feedback form. We will be publishing the outcomes of that, and it really does help us to refine the design through the next stage. Okay, I've got one more comment on speed. The speed as in we're getting a typed message coming in. Just hold on one more minute. Yes, it's been a long process. I agree with you. It has taken a long time to get to this point. We have gone out to tender for contractors to do these works a few weeks ago. The contractors walked around the site on Friday last week, and we pointed out the very particularities of this site. They obviously also understand sensitivities, and also making clear that this is a process where the residents are very much front and centre to this work being done. We will have a contractor appointed to do this work in summer, and we're going to spend 6 months with them doing very, very careful planning, because to do this work with residents staying in their homes is obviously an undertaking that you don't rush into. But our programme shows that after those 6 months, so starting in March or April next year, we should be fitting the first windows at that time. And it's obviously going to be something that we have to manage carefully. So it will take some time to go through all of the blocks, but the tender is for all of the blocks. and they will start in March or April next year with the windows. So I think that point as well, I think we've heard that yesterday, that people are tired of over consultation fatigue. This is the final part of the design consultation for the outside of the building. So and you know, as you say, it's a level of how much detail residents want to get into. Some want to get into a lot of fine detail, others are quite happy for our expert team to make design choices based on their expertise. I hope you find that the balance that we're striking here is correct, but this is the sort of the last part of it. So yeah, we really appreciate your taking the time to be here and feeding back in the chat and being part of the conversation. So thanks to those of you who have joined us online, and just a reminder, we are recording this meeting and we will put it up to our website. We need to do a little bit of making it fit for purpose to go up there, so it'll take a few days to do that. But if everybody's happy, we can finish the meeting now and we can stop the recording. Thank you.
Thank you.